My name is Chad Erickson, and I'm the Vice President of Strategy at MyAdvice. And it's my pleasure to welcome you here today for our Vodcast. And today, joining me is our guest, Dylan Kemna. He is the Vice President of Sales and Marketing at Optical. I've known Dylan, my goodness, for probably a dozen years. And Dylan he's in his 15th year with Optical. He has worked with a LASIK marketing agency. In fact, he worked for this agency, and then they were using Optical. And he's like, "That's a really cool solution. I want to work for them." And so he moved over there. He's passionate about networking. I met him at a conference. We're like, "Man, we got to do some things together." And so we have over the years, and it's just phenomenal. But anyway, he understands that because he was so passionate about it, because he saw how well it worked for his clients at this agency. And then from there, because he loves networking, I think this is one of the things, Dylan, that stood out to me so much is that you started these networking groups on LinkedIn, and for marketing, and whether it was for dentistry or plastic surgery, dermatology, ophthalmology, audiology, you mentioned as well, to where now there's over 100,000 subscribers collectively to these resources to really help sustain one another and support each other, which is fantastic. So kudos to you. Because I know you're passionate about helping. Also, and this should, we can't miss this, but Dylan is also a graduate of the Ohio State University. Go Buckeyes, right, Dylan? Got that?
Bucks.
And something that not everybody knows, but Dylan has actually visited all states, every 50 state here in the United States, and over 20 countries. One of my first impressions when I met you, Dylan, was you are a true Renaissance man. I've seen that. I know you enjoy reading and sports and music, but you're passionate about helping your clients, which is great. But thank you so much for being here today. Tell us a little bit more about you and Optical. Give our audience today a little bit more information about who Optical is and what you do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for that introduction. It's an honor to be here, Chad. It's been really great getting to know you and Advice Media over the years. Such a well-respected company in the industry. Gave a little bit of background about my history. I started with a LASIK marketing agency that used Optical, so I got to see how it worked firsthand. Got to know our CEO, Bill Mercier. Kind of approached him on how I thought I could help him grow the business from Denver, Colorado. And as far as Optical, if you're not familiar with Optical, Optical started in 2002, started in the LASIK marketing space, but we work in other specialties, mostly around premium medical, and that when you're advertising a premium procedure, it's really important that somebody has an exceptional experience at that first point of contact.
Yes.
When they're paying out of pocket for a procedure that could be worth several thousands of dollars, as opposed to like an insurance-based appointment that might be worth a few $100s. It's a different mindset, and a lot of practices kind of disconnect there, where they're not always aware of what that initial experience is like for a prospective customer at their practice.
My gosh, they really don't, right? Well, I think a lot of them do, but it's sometimes the knowledge. So yeah, you've got 15 years here with Optical and the experience prior to that as well. And I'll tell you, first of all, 15 years with one company is remarkable. So kudos to you. But during that time, Dylan, you've obviously seen a lot of great opportunities as well. Some of the challenges. What are some of those top challenges that you see with practices today, particularly when it comes to these premium services that you mentioned?
Well, what we come across quite a bit is a lot of times the people answering the phone calls, the initial lead calls, aren't always the best trained. They don't have the most experience. They might be multitasking. And something about the medical space, there's often a disconnect that the people that work for a medical practice view themselves as medical professionals, and there is a sales component to converting these leads.
Totally.
And there's sometimes this negative stigma about sales where it's really not about that. It's either maybe a lack of training or a fear of rejection, but having a system like we have at Optical enables the people handling the calls to be able to take control of the phone call and create a great experience while maximizing that opportunity for the practice. and for the prospective patient.
So, yeah, I think you nailed it, right? We talk about these challenges, and I hear it all the time and it goes back to the old adage, right? You never get a second chance to make a first impression.
That's true.
And whether it's because someone doesn't have the right training, they don't understand that they are really the person of first contact, and they are setting that first impression. And I've told a lot of the clients I've consulted for the past 24 years that the most important person in your office is not you. And they're like, what? But look at my degrees all on this wall. I have certificates to back it up from all these prestigious universities. I'm like, awesome. I'm like, that person that you're paying whatever minimum wage to, they can make or break your practice. They're the ones that people that are going to talk to first. How is that person? Are they reflective of you? And so it's a challenge, right? There's turnover. There's, how do you maintain consistent training? Are you monitoring those calls? All those things. So what you're saying with OptiCall is that you're answering the calls for them. Is that correct?
That's kind of our core service. That's how we got started. We call that first contact. That's the inbound call handling and scheduling. As we've evolved over the years, we have about 5 different tiers to that program where
awesome.
We're not 24/7, but we do offer coverage 7 days a week. Eastern time, that's 8:30 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday, and noon to 6 on Saturdays and Sundays. So that converts accordingly to the different time zones. We have programs for business hours only coverage. A popular program, especially in aesthetics, is our overflow and extended hours of coverage. Sometimes our biggest competition can be the staff itself. So that's a good way to walk before we run, where we can back them up during business hours if they're tied up with a patient. Can't always anticipate when those leads are coming through, so it's nice to have a safety net like that. And then we have options for just after hours or just overflow. So that's on first contact. And as we've evolved, we also have a service for web lead response. We still refer to it as our new program. It's going on over 5 years now, but we had tracked the trends, and we just saw this trend with practices that through agencies like Advice Media, just generating more online forms. So we have a similar process internally in terms of like our phone scripting program and how we handle those calls. But there's kind of a set cadence in terms of how we reach out to them with a phone call, a text message, and an email when those leads come in. We do a couple rounds of that, and then have a couple drip text campaigns and drip email campaigns just to maximize those opportunities.
That is a phenomenal service. And of course, I know it, and I've seen the demos and referred many of our clients over, because I know how powerful it can be. But here's kind of what, I'm hearing this, right? But last week, I'm hosting a webinar, and one of the questions that came through, because one of the consultant that was on this call was saying, the person who answers the phone calls has to be so succinct. You've got to, have really a script, and this is how you do it. Mm-hmm. But the question came in, what do we do after hours, and how do we incentivize our staff? And that's a tricky question, right? Because the staff's like, hey, I'm done. I just got done working 8 hours. Do I really want to be on call, if you will, 5 hours a night from maybe 5 to 10 to maybe take these calls, and on weekends? But we know that that's a valuable time. A lot of people are, not be able to do things during the day, but if you can be just even that overfill, that could easily be between evenings and Saturdays. We're talking anywhere from 25 to 35 hours that you can offer support of other calls coming in that maybe the practice is saying, we just can't get to it. But how much more business could be additive because of that? And that is huge, right?
That's a good question. Yes, for sure. What we've seen with practices, sometimes if you ask the staff, they might say, "Oh, if you give me an incentive, I'll take a cell phone home with me."
Sure.
And the challenge is you miss out on the consistency, and it's really the key component to delivering a great experience is that consistency. We have developed our own phone scripting program. It's called OptiTrack, something that we license as well. But it ensures that consistency from our counselors, that we follow what we call logical progression. So every phone call is going to have a proper introduction, exploration, education, and closing. And our goal isn't to sell the procedure. It's really to sell the initial step. Make sure a lot of people are asking about price. I consider it somewhat of an artificial question that people ask about price because they don't really know how to distinguish one practice from the next. So that's where they start. And I'm not saying you should avoid that question, but there's a finesse to how you engage these people. For us, it's always whatever they ask, I can definitely help you with that. And we do it with a smile. Is this your first time contacting us? Great.
Yeah.
Have your name and number just in case we get disconnected. I can call you right back. And it's basic customer service, but it's with a bit of an agenda. Getting that name and number, you've at least captured that lead. You have a way to follow up with them. You can use their name in conversation. According to Dale Carnegie, somebody's name is their favorite word. So you don't want to overdo it, but it's a good way to build rapport. We'll ask, we encourage active listening. So you said it was your first time reaching out. Do you mind if I ask how you heard about us? And depending on the procedure they're asking about in our system, it works like a decision tree. So if it were like LASIK, it brings up exploratory questions. Can you tell me what type of trouble you're having with your vision? Find out if it's distance or reading. Are you in glasses or contacts? And we might ask some disqualifying questions about previous eye conditions or surgeries. And this can be done in any specialty, whether it's like liposuction or cosmetic dentistry. Whatever those important questions are to a practice, we just don't want to go into a full-blown consultation.
Right.
And then kind of when we get to the education section of the phone call, that's where we'd address the pricing. And in our system, we're going to have that pre-scripted. So everybody's very consistent in how they deliver that. If it's a specific amount, we're going to kind of validate that. The nice thing about us is there's no surprises. It's this rate. And or it might just be something to the effect of the price ranges from $1,500 to $2,500 based on the technology it's best suited for you. That's why we encourage you to come in for the consultation. And then we start painting the picture of that next step. Another miss for most practices, probably the biggest, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, but
sure, no, this is great.
We do these free lead conversion assessments, which is kind of a fancy name for a mystery shop because we're doing recorded calls and web forms. The biggest thing is that practices aren't getting a name and number. So a lot of the phone calls are resulting as lost leads because they may answer their questions, but they don't have any way of following up with them. A lot of them aren't asking for the appointment. They might mention the consultation, but they don't ask for it, and they don't paint a picture of what happens during that consultation. And then one of the other takeaways is if somebody's not ready to schedule, it's really important to have a backup offer to be able to maximize these opportunities. So if somebody's like, oh, I need to talk to my spouse, our counselors are trained. I completely understand. Would it be all right if we sent you out some information to help you with your decision? You'll have our information for when you're ready. Internally, we categorize those leads into 3 buckets. It's either going to be a booked appointment, what we call a phone inquiry, send information. Those are going to be your warmer leads. And we also have a phone inquiry still researching. We may have gotten a name and number, but they declined that informational offer. So might not be as warm as somebody that did opt into that.
So that's phenomenal. So a couple of things that I heard. One is that I love, you don't call them a rep. They're called a counselor, right? And that, I think that really changes it, the dynamic to start with. So start there, right? You have this counselor, but you're not necessarily trying to get into the weeds with anybody, but basically because you're asking intelligent questions and following this script, what you're doing is figuring out a way to grade out each of these leads to basically an A, B, or C type categories. What I heard, you can call it what you want, but yeah, this person's ready to move today. This person is sort of on the fence. This person's probably lower, but you're figuring out a way to create kind of a grade around that. Yeah. And so, yeah. Which is phenomenal.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's something I didn't really touch on earlier is when somebody asks about price, I don't think they want the cheapest. I think they want to know that they called the right place. So
yes,
by having a process and a concise system, it's going to help your practice stand out. Where if you call some of your competitors in town and you find you really come across 3 scenarios. One is practices might have challenges with bandwidth. So you might get a voicemail, you might get somebody at the front desk that says you'd have to speak to one of our coordinators and they offer to take a message. And then you have to play phone tag where there's stats that say less than 27% of people will leave a voicemail, and then you have to get them back. Google calls it a micro moment when somebody's emotionally compelled to pick up the phone, whether it's
right.
hours, weekend, whenever, but you got to get them while they're hot. The other scenario is the person that's not really vested in the practice. They feel like they're doing their job if they answer the questions. So you ask about the price for breast augmentation, and they say it's 5 to 10,000. Is there anything else I can help you with? And then you let them know you're just doing some research, and the phone call ends pretty quickly. And it almost seems like the person at the practice level is relieved to get to their next task. The third scenario is reaching a seasoned coordinator, somebody that's been with the practice for a while, where they might create a great experience from a customer perspective in that they're not very pushy, they're authentic, they talk a little bit about their own experience, they talk in detail about what happens. But because most of them don't have a process in place, even those seasoned coordinators miss these key takeaways of get a name and number up front, ask for the appointment, have a backup offer, and there's also a finesse of like what we call the push versus pull method. Like if they're doing all the talking and they're not asking any questions. So you kind of want to keep a balance there to keep that engagement with the caller, learn a little bit more about their situation, and try to max that opportunity for the practice.
Yeah, totally. My gosh, I was talking to another of our clients last week, and somebody I've known for a long time. And I said, "Hey, tell me what's going on these days. How are things?" And she was lamenting to me. She's like, Chad, I feel like some of these people we hire just lack any zero common sense on how to talk to somebody on a phone. She's like, and we've trained some of them, but to your point, she said it seems like they want to get off that phone call so badly, as opposed to just listening and realizing this is an opportunity. And a lot of the numbers that I've seen show that the cost per lead is anywhere from $250 to $500. So that person calling, just cost the practice $250 to $500 to get them to take action, email, phone call, right? And if our mentality is that I would just want to I'll answer the question and get off this call, we're missing an opportunity. If a lead's coming in and we're not wanting to pick up the phone and call them back, we're missing out on huge opportunities. If we're sitting on these leads for a long time and not calling back, we're really missing out, because, you were sharing with me the data. What happens, after like the first hour if you don't get back to them?
We often reference this study that was done by MIT. It says my biggest takeaway from it was if you don't respond within the first hour, your likelihood of converting those leads decreases in half. So any lead study has everything to do with speed to lead. You'd be surprised how many practices generate these web forms but might not even call them at all. We do these assessments where we'll find one thing that's consistent at the practice level is they're consistently inconsistent, where you might have a lead that goes unanswered. You might have one that gets responded to in an hour and maybe they get one phone call. You might have another one where they get emailed once 2 days later. Right. So it's really important to have the same cadence every time. And it seems like a lot of these practices struggle with that. It might just be like a scalability issue, and that if they could be in the office, it's hard to keep that balance, that they're going to prioritize the people there, but you want to have your sales funnel, and you want to have everything running like a well-oiled machine, that that you got new leads coming in through Advice Media. You've got a good system to convert them. Interesting stat that's probably worth sharing is 94% of marketing budgets are spent on lead generation, and less than 6% is spent on lead conversion. So it's like you're kind of spinning your wheels if you're generating these leads and you don't have a good system to convert them.
It's so true. I remember a couple of years ago we were running a fairly aggressive. It wasn't super expensive, but we're running a good PPC campaign for a plastic surgeon, and
Mhm.
highly focused on facelifts. The doctor at the time was charging around $20,000 to $25,000 for a facelift. And after a couple of months, we had generated over 150 leads. And I find with PPC that quality leads off of a campaign are about 50%. So give it a haircut, let's call it 75. The staff, when the doctor's like, hey, how are these leads coming along? They said, oh, they're really nothing good with those. You probably shouldn't spend any money on that. And so he and I talked, and he's like, oh, we got to cut this back. It's not working. We tried it. And I'm like, what do you mean it's not working? I'm like, have you seen the emails and listened to the phone calls? He's like, what? I'm like, check this out. And I printed out these emails for him and showed it to him and sent him these, and then gave him the phone calls where he could listen to it. He
Uh-huh.
listened to 2 phone calls and he immediately said, Chad, I'm sorry. He's like, it's not you, it's us. We are not equipped to handle the volume that you're sending us. We're not following up on the leads and we're not answering them properly. If you think about it, let's say, $20,000, dollars and 75 leads. Even if you only got, 10 of those, I
Mhm.
mean, 10 of those converted, the 75, you're over $200,000 in new business. In all reality, he probably lost out on about $1 million worth of business. And on top of that, lifetime value of each patient. So there's a lot of money that was lost because a staff couldn't, right? And I don't want to fault the staff completely. Those that are listening today might be saying, hey, you just described our practice, or I feel overwhelmed,
Mhm.
or yeah, we don't have good training in place, or our turnover is high, or we're all wearing so many hats that the ability to do this effectively is hurting us. And
Mhm.
that's where I think OptiCall really is a solution. So, we've given a lot of high level information today, Dylan, and we could obviously dive into the weeds, and that's not what today's purpose is. So for all of everyone who's watching or listening today, that's like, their mind is like kind of racing a little bit, thinking, that might be a great solution to help my practice. How do they contact you to at least have a discovery call? I think that's a good place to start, right? Is, hey, let's jump on a call, email me, let's do an evaluation, let's see what the needs are. So for anybody listening today, how do they reach you?
Well, phone number at OptiCall, 877-238-0555. Just ask for Dylan. You're welcome to email me. It's D Kemna, K-E-M as in Mary, N as in Nancy, A as in Apple, at OptiCall, OPTICALL.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. As far as getting engaged with OptiCall, usually the first step is that free lead conversion assessment. It can take 3 to 4 weeks. It just provides a pretty good barometer on what the new patient experience is like. We're not there to stump your counselors. We're going to
Yeah,
place 4 or 5 calls, and we place 3 to 5 web forms just to get an idea of what that patient experience is like, the new patient experience. It helps in creating awareness for the practice on opportunities for improvement. We'll show them our process. I'll give you a demo of our system. And then we have this cost calculator spreadsheet where we'll crunch some numbers, because we're not the best fit for everyone. So we'll look at the biggest things are probably number of leads and revenue per patient. Because in order for OptiCall to be a good fit, it really has to be 3 things. It has to be a better customer experience, a good return on investment for the practice where our service actually pays for itself, and it should free up time for your staff. So it should be win-win across the board. And even if your practice isn't the right fit, you're going to get some good takeaways, and we're happy to do it just to create that awareness, plant the seed for when the timing is right.
that's awesome. And I love those 3 elements, and if really helping out. So tremendous. Dylan, thank you so much for being here with us today. And to everyone listening and watching, thank you. And we will continue to bring you valuable information like this. And we appreciate all of our guests. And we wish all of you the best. Take care until the next time.